Every day is Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Podcast description. It is Friday, March 17th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, executive editor of The American Prospect, David Dayen, will be with us. Look back on the week that was. Talk about banks. Also on the program today, Matt Strackbein, also known as the LetterHack.
Woo!
And filmmaker Janek Ambros, the filmmaker who made Mondo Hollywoodland, and the animator who drew and produced Mondo Hollywoodland cartoon or animated book. Also on the program today, 11 of the biggest banks inject billions into First Republic to save another one of those so-called mid-size banks. Xi visits Russia. This on the day that the U.S. releases a video of a Russian fuel dump on an American drone. Protests erupt in France over proposed retirement age hike by Macron. Literally just by Macron. Elite military commanders in Israel plan a walkout over Bibi's Supreme Court evisceration plan. Tennessee Nissan plant votes down union. Senate advances the repeal of the Iraq war authorizations. The North Dakota Supreme Court blocks an abortion ban as Utah bans all abortion clinics. Florida now the 8th state to ban a parent's ability to authorize transgender health care for their kids. Kentucky legislature does the same thing, and new data links COVID origins to raccoon sales in the Wuhan wet market. Lastly, I guess, for sure, the Massachusetts Supreme Court upholds the right for rudeness in town hall meetings. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Casual Friday, so casual that I'm going to be stumbling all over myself because I'm a little bit tired. Yeah, someone already just said, concerned viewer, just is Sam okay? I'm tired. I didn't get enough sleep last night.
But your tiredness is kind of translating into general goofiness, which is always the best version of tired, at least for me. Because
I'm not cranky, but I'm also...
You're just delirious.
I'm not lucid. So...
yeah. I just want to say that right to be rude, that I think that is a good, important step for democracy. Mm-hmm. You yourself are a victim of a sort of code of, I don't know, conviviality that gets you canceled from platforms because apparent rudeness or something, alleged rudeness.
Totally.
And I would just say there's no light without heat, and like, good job, Massachusetts.
Honestly, this should be a constitutional provision.
Well, I do have some mixed feelings on this. We'll talk about it later in the program. But
okay, I'm surprised by that.
Well, I was going to go into it, but we're going to get to the guests and whatnot. But Southborough, just a bunch of snowflakes there.
Oh yeah.
You know. So, I mean, they're not as bad as Auburn, but go into South Row, everybody's got to tiptoe around everybody there.
Wow.
It's really...
I wouldn't have expected that.
I didn't know that your subjective opinions about regions were going to overtake your
It's not a
principle like
region.
this.
It's just a town.
No.
I mean,
Well,
it's no, Pittsburgh. But Auburn is just like, oh, please, why with such snowflakes? I'm sorry. We'll do this another time. Yep. Okay.
okay.
Let's get right into this. I've watched some real abominations on, to bring on David Sachs to talk about the bank failures is, I mean, and ostensibly from shows that sell themselves as lefty shows is pretty stunning. I mean, some people are just absolute idiots, and some people are just sort of like, incredibly shameless in their grift. But don't ever utter the word neoliberal if you could bring David Sachs on to explain to you what should be done and whose fault the banking crisis was. My God.
Pair this.
Do people not understand that the word neoliberal comes from essentially like the original neoliberals were von Mises and Hayek at Mont Pelerin, and
No, it means it's a woman with a shrill voice that I don't like.
It's New Democrats that do identity politics.
It's so,
when a Democrat's
so
cringy.
So dumb. It just and unforgivably dumb. You don't have a politics YouTube show for 12 years and still sort of like justify being an idiot because I do comedy.
Yeah. Well, when he's not interviewing David Sachs, he's going through my Twitter mentions and retweeting replies to me where none of the topics have anything to do with him.
8 years ago, Jimmy Dore was sitting with the CFO of TYT talking about how great David Sachs' partner at PayPal would be in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, this is full circle.
Yep. All right. But getting on to actually and we've outlined, we're going to outline this again with Dayen. There are multiple levels to the extent that we have a banking crisis, why that's happening. But all of the commentary and all of the explanations as to why there was a bank run, as to why Silicon Valley Bank and other banks of its ilk may be over-leveraged, maybe undercapitalized. All of these subsidiary questions are subsidiary to the one simple fact that banking regulations were rolled back and no longer were applied to banks that had less than $250 billion in assets, as opposed to less than $50 billion in assets. And the reason why it was at $50 billion in assets was because if a bank goes under, it has less than $50 billion worth of assets, okay, some people are going to get burned, but it's not going to bring down the system. And that's it, bottom line. Here's Elizabeth Warren at the Senate Finance Committee hearing talking about that rollback, because everything else that we can talk about with the so-called bank crisis is a function of this, and we would not be talking about it. The FDIC takes over banks fairly regularly.
It was like every other week in 2008.
In 2008, it was more than that even. But it, even in the course of like everything's going smoothly, it'll do one every couple of months. We never hear about it because it doesn't matter. And SBV really wouldn't have been a story outside of tech bubble circles if it weren't for the fact that there was no regulation on it.
enhanced liquidity requirements that ensure that banks have enough cash on hand to meet their obligations, particularly in times of stress, capital requirements that better position banks to absorb losses, regular resolution plans to help guide regulators safely through winding down failed banks. All of these were weakened in 2018, and when SVB failed. This is a part, in my view, of the Fed's actions that led to weaker regulation. You know, over the last few days, we've heard a lot of Republicans say that this collapse wasn't their fault. It was the banking regulators who were asleep at the wheel. And believe me, I have questions for a lot of the banking regulators. But Congress handed Chair Powell the flamethrower that he aimed at the banking rules. In fact, he said so himself, I'll quote and then I'll quit. When he announced that he was weakening regulations for the banks like SBV, Chair Powell said, and I quote, "In the rules before us, we are applying the discretion granted to us by the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act." Translation, Congress opened the door to weaker regulations, and I'm waltzing right through it. That's true. Congress needs to close that door.
That's the bottom line. From 2001 to 2023, like when we were at the height of the crisis in 2009, 2008, 2009, you were getting you had 140 banks in 2009 that were taken over by FDIC.
Wow. So I was lowballing.
Well, in 2010, it was 157. By the time you get to 2014, it was 18 banks. 2015, 8 banks. 2016, 5 banks. 2017, 8 banks. 2018, 0 banks. 2019, 4 banks. 2020, 4 banks. 21 and 22, no banks. This year, 2 banks. The reason why we're hearing about this is because of that rollback. Mm-hmm. Because it's a big bank. And then the other reason why we're hearing about it is because it's all a bunch of tech pros who have access to the way that we create stories now.
And who are using media operations like CNBC to beg for money. And there are a lot of people following suit with that. And
we'll talk to Dayen about this too, because a lot of these people have the phone numbers for Janet Yellen and for Powell and for people in the administration, et cetera, et cetera. And that, of course, Dayen will walk us through this, but essentially they get on television and say, the sky is falling. Mm-hmm. We've got to save the depositors, without really saying like, oh, incidentally, I'm either a depositor or I've got $200 million in that bank, or some of the key elements of my investment portfolio, they have their payrolls, there or something.
And good on Elizabeth Warren for being consistent on, she said from day one, Biden should not be, for bipartisanship reasons, keeping Jerome Powell on as the head of the Fed. She's been continuously critical of him throughout this process, and it's paying dividends now because we hear that he is fighting tooth and nail to get rid of, and Dayen wrote this up, any kind of mention of regulation as a response to this.
We will talk to Dayen about that in a moment. Just a word from our sponsor today, my favorite sponsor, ladies and gentlemen, Sunset Lake. Sebede.com. You use the coupon code 20 left is best. You get 20% off everything at sunsetlakesebede.com. Folks, there not only is there tinctures great to go to sleep, they got melatonin in one of their tinctures. They've got multiple flavors of their tinctures, multiple strengths of their tinctures, but they also have smokables. They have great I had over the last weekend great coffee with Sebede in it, which is my weekend brew. They have a fudge with Sebede. They got great gummies. They got gummies with 0.3 THC. So the Sebede and THC. And I have to say, for those of us who don't indulge in THC in the way that we used to when we were younger, that stuff is, that's an evening. for a guy like me. And they have, like I said, smokables, just a great product, great integrity. It is all checked by third parties. They don't use any pesticides or herbicides. They use integrated pest management. They use regenerative farming practices. They are great movement partners. They've donated thousands of dollars to striker work funds, to immigration resettlement, to food pantries, to give directly. They just all around, they do great business practices, $20 minimum wage, but mostly employee-owned company. Just a great bunch of folks and a great product. And, there's something called now that I've been hearing about called the entourage effect. Are you familiar with the entourage effect?
Like the
no.
HBO show?
No.
Okay.
It is like, I'm learning more about THC as it is now legal in New York State. And, you're learning about like terpenes and this and that and all this other stuff. But they're also finding that like it's not always your THC level. When you combine it with CBD, it creates what they call an entourage effect and can elongate certain things.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's something to...
and maybe throw on some entourage.
quite literally put into your pipe and smoke it. So that is 20% off. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, sunsetlakecbd.com. Also, our sponsor today, Aura. They make it possible for me not to be constantly worried about my identity being stolen. And I worry about that all the time because God knows where my kids are on, on the internet and whatnot. But data leaks constantly. We see it all the time. When you put your email address into Aura, when you input it with a 2-week free trial, it will kick back to you all the places where that email and the password associated with it has been compromised. You will see who have had data leaks. You will see what stuff is being sold on the dark web, including your social security number if it's out there. All this stuff, super important for you to know because the stuff gets traded back and forth. And at one point, they're going to come after you. These hackers or phishers or this and that, they're going to try and break into your accounts. And there'll be accounts that you don't even remember that you signed up for. But if you used your password and email combination that you use in other places, that data leak happens there. Could have happened a year ago. It's being traded. And at one point, these guys are going to go through it and try it on like banking sites or other sites or your Twitter or whatever it is. Aura, it protects you from those scammers and hackers. They also help you fight back against those websites that put all your information, your public information out there from the phone book or whatnot. It keeps you from getting, reducing robocalls. It keeps you from getting junk mail and operational security because they send automatic takedown notices. Or it gives you near-time real alerts on suspicious credit inquiries, like if someone's trying to open up a credit card in your name. Maybe they get like one of those, they steal your mail and they take one of those credit card offers and they try and do that type of thing, or they open a loan in your name. Aura will let you know about that immediately. Their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. They protect your devices from viruses, malware, and spyware. They also can restrict the way that your kids use their devices. Make sure that they're doing focus time, or there's no apps that they can get that you don't approve of, or that they can't use their phones for 12 hours at a click. They also have a password manager that allows you to store and access your online passwords securely and conveniently. And the bottom line is you may have an app that does one of these things. Well, Aura does all 7. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura is going to give you a 2-week free trial, my link. That link, aura.com/majority. You start your free trial. You will be shocked, like I say, of how much of your private information Aura finds exposed over those 2 weeks. Aura, AURA.com/majority. We'll put a link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Quick break. We'll be right back with David Dayen. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report, joining us on the program, rejoining us, as it were. David Dayen, the executive editor of The American Prospect. And you could follow David at on Twitter at, what's your Twitter handle?
At D-Dayen, where I got laptops, I got phones, I got it all.
I told this story. Somebody.
I got a trench coat open. I got watches.
Somebody sent me a link to the offer that was on your Twitter feed. You know, giving away a MacBook Pros for like, I'll give away 2 for $1,000, and I'll sign my name on it. And
you say no?
Okay. My first reaction was like, oh, they're doing some weird fundraiser for the Prospect. I mean, good for Dayen, and so I texted you, and you were just like, God, dude, why would you think I'm giving away laptops? And I'm like, I don't know, but I thought I could buy both my kids a laptop for $600.
Not just you. I've had like New York Times reporters write me. I've had like an insane number of people that should know better say, hey, you got those laptops? No, of course I don't. I don't have a side hustle in laptops.
I mean, it could have been a fundraiser, but okay. All right, so we've talked about that. You should really get you should check out our sponsor today, aura.com, because this type of thing, I mean, you said like it came from a
well, I don't know what it came from. I mean, 6 months ago, as Emma mentioned before we got on, I was hacked. That was my fault. I clicked on something bad. This time, I was just on the site. I was just scrolling, and all of a sudden I lost control of it. And this happened, and you know,
can you use a special password for Twitter, please?
I do. That's not the issue. The issue is that now there's just no security on this site. As you, I mean, there are a couple weird things about it. I had just got done doing a viral thread about blowing up David Sachs, who is like Elon's best friend, and then suddenly I get hacked. Like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you know, you do the math. And yeah, our health insurance at our company is part of DC HealthLink, which has been hacked, and all the personal information of that has been sent out on the dark web. So, I mean, you know, look, you're just not very secure anywhere, least of all Twitter, where it's now been a week and that scam is still running. And despite it being reported hundreds of times by followers of me who instantly then get blocked. So now, like, if I ever get the thing back, I have all these people blocked that I don't know about. There's because, you know, the Twitter offices now have tumbleweed through them to a greater degree than people. There's no way to deal with this, really, it seems. And I may never
should have paid you $8, bud. Should have paid your $8 a month.
It's a shame because I'm sure Elon would want you on his platform breaking all this news this week, but he just couldn't get around to it.
He's working on it. I know people who've been who are verified who've been hacked like this. I mean, this is an epidemic, and there actually are stories coming out about this. It's kind of a larger thing. You know, obviously it's personal for me, but it's the fact that, you know, when we make these essential communications pieces of infrastructure, and then you put absolutely no effort into the information security around them, they become very inviting targets. You know, I had like 83,000 followers who have sort of a personal relationship with the feed and are willing to believe that I sell laptops on the side.
I mean, look, you could have had extra laptops, whatever. But the point is, there's also a lot of people who are probably getting scammed.
That's the other thing. And I can't do anything to help them right now because I can't get in there. So, I mean, I'm more concerned about the fact that the thing is still active and not suspended than I am about getting it back.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about what you had tweeted before that. And let's start there, because I just watched a David Sachs being interviewed on the Jimmy Dore show, who was explaining and I could have watched him on the Glenn Greenwald show on Rumble.
And you could have paid like $3,000 minimum to get into that fundraiser that he threw for Ro Khanna. Then maybe you could have had an in-person conversation. You might have had to go up to $13,000, as you guys wrote about in the prospect.
Now, just to be fair, David Sachs has no deposits, according to him, in SBV. Now, of course, he does have a lot of companies that he's invested in have deposits there, but that doesn't mean that he would have any interest in any type of
bailout. No personal
no incentive, none whatsoever. But in the 40-minute interview that I saw, he basically blamed the Fed for this, but because their interest rates were so low that it caused everybody to over leverage and get stuck with bonds that were not valuable, and with interest rates that were so low that they were looking for other places to put their money, and that it caused runaway inflation, and that's why the Fed had to raise their rates so much. That was his story. Tell us what the real story is, please.
Well, I mean, the important thing to know about the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and the subsequent actions is that everyone was at fault. And when everyone's at fault, that makes it supremely easy for individual people who were at fault to point to the other person who was at fault to deflect blame. So you can go right on down the line and see failures here at pretty much every level. And I almost don't know where to begin, because you could begin at any part of this story.
Well, let's start.
Yeah,
but this is what I think like we should start at, because from my perspective, there is the most upstream cause of this was the rollback. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you tell me if I'm wrong. In other words,
the deregulation.
The deregulation in 2017, 2018. If that doesn't happen, there may be problems at SBV, but they're not allowed to grow, to metastasize like this.
Well, I mean, and you have groups like the Bank Policy Institute, which is a bunch of bank lobbyists, saying that no, actually, the deregulation wouldn't have changed this at all. So, I mean, you have there's contestation going on at every level of this, and finger pointing going on at every level of this. But it is absolutely clear that the 2018 deregulation bill, which I call the Crapo bill because it reflects both its author and its content, Mike Crapo, the senator from Idaho, that bill absolutely was laser targeted at the very regional banks that are experiencing crisis right now. The stadium banks, as I called it, that aren't big enough to be a global systemic financial institution. However, they are big enough to get naming rights to a stadium. These are the banks that are in this wheelhouse right now. And the biggest things in that bill helped those banks. It did two major things. One was increasing the threshold for enhanced prejudicial regulation from 50 billion in assets to 250 billion in assets. So increasing that threshold, which meant that everyone that was at 47 billion, 50 billion, and didn't want to go over that line because they would get a whole bunch more compliance risk that they would have to deal with. Then they can say, oh, now the line's up here. We can keep growing. We can keep eating other community banks.
We can get five times as large.
We can get 5 times as big. And that's exactly what Silicon Valley Bank did. And it's what Signature Bank did. There's that part of it. And then
let me just ask you a question about that, though, because wasn't the theory that, and I think Powell's argument was like, these are not, I don't know exactly the term of art. These banks do not constitute a systemic risk, right? Like they're not big enough to constitute a systemic risk.
Right.
But if that's the case, why did the country come to a standstill for 3 days? Like, everybody's like this.
Well, and
definitionally, how could that be?
And indeed, to bail out the depositors, they had to invoke a systemic risk exception to the rules, because Dodd-Frank kind of banned bailouts, but there was this exception. They had to say, oh, these guys are a systemic risk, and that's why we have to do this. So it completely, refutes their entire point right there. Obviously, we knew this going in. IndyMac was under $250 billion. Continental Illinois in the 80s was under $250 billion. There are all kinds of examples of banks of this size whose failure leads to a systemic problem. And so this was never, and by the way, if it wasn't for several Senate Democrats, this bill would never have happened. Mark Warner, John Tester, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, they co-wrote this with Crapo.
Right.
And they are completely 100% responsible for this happening and are completely unashamed about it, because Warner, even now, is going on television saying that this was a good bill. And Tester is out, doing the blame game, pointing the finger at something else. And we can talk about that something else later. But so the bill did first the raising the threshold. The second thing it did is it invited the Fed to deregulate even further. It changed one word in a statute, a statute known as the tailoring rule. And this rule says that the Federal Reserve has the ability to tailor rules to what they see as the risk involved with that bank. And they changed that from the Fed may tailor rules to the Fed shall tailor rules. That's all they did. They changed one word. That shall triggered a process where the Fed had to undergo this look at all these banks of a particular size, and then see if they were going to change the rules. And that's exactly what they did in 2019. They tailored the rules to weaken them even further on the stadium banks, on the banks between $100 and $250 billion. Lael Brainerd, who is now the head of the National Economic Council, came out and said, this is a really bad idea. This is kind of stunning to see a dissent at the Fed at all. And she came out, she was a Fed governor at the time, and said, this is a really bad idea. This is going to increase risk in the system. This is going to increase financial instability. And this is going to make it more likely that there will be taxpayer bailouts. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. And
that's why she's now nominated to be the chair of the Fed, right? Because she clearly understood what the implications of this would be, and that is being rewarded by our system.
Right. Well, what we know is that the Fed doesn't give a crap about financial regulation or supervision at all. They see it as secondary to their macroeconomic policy role, when in fact what we learned this week is that it's central and inextricable from their macroeconomic policy role. And now we can start talking about the Fed in this, because not only did they roll back some of these rules, which was discretionary, it was discretionary deregulation what they did. They had the opportunity, they had to look to tailor the rules, but they didn't have to do it the exact way they did. And what they did is they went in the most deregulatory direction. So not only did they do that, but the primary supervisor of Silicon Valley Bank was the Federal Reserve. They were the regulator. They had the examiner, specifically the San Francisco Federal Reserve, the regional bank, which is part of the main central bank, their examiners were the ones looking at Silicon Valley Bank. By the way, the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank was a director of the San Francisco Federal Reserve until Friday, until a week ago.
Interesting.
When suddenly on the website it says vacant under his name. So so what we learned today, there was a Bloomberg piece, San Francisco Fed trying to cover their ass. They put out this thing that says, oh, well, we sent them what are known as matters requiring attention. We saw that the bank had this interest rate risk because they put all their money, or a lot of their money, into long dated securities did well at low interest rates. And when the interest rates went up, the value of those securities went down. They didn't hedge that risk in any way. They tried to keep it in the hold for maturity on their books. In other words, they didn't want to realize those losses. They had these massive unrealized losses on their balance sheet. And then the bank also had this huge flight risk because most of their deposits were over $250,000. All of them came from the same industry of people who are on Slack with one another. So they didn't have 30,000 depositors. They had like 9 because it was just a bunch of people in VC chats with one another. And so they had this huge flight risk on one side, which would make them realize these losses, and these huge unrealized losses on the other side, which they were trying to skate around. But if as soon as there was any trouble at the bank and any kind of loss of deposits, they would have to realize those losses. And the San Francisco Fed, according to them in this story in Bloomberg, knew this and sent them these stern letters that said, you might want to take a look at this. You have no risk management on your interest rate. This is basic banking 101. You haven't accounted for the potential change in interest rates. And the bank did nothing, and the San Francisco Fed didn't follow up. They just sent letters.
Well, wasn't that because they are so woke because they're from San Francisco? Right?
It could be.
And they're infected with wokeness. And so they don't want to offend the bank in that instance. But
so here's what we have.
And just to be clear.
Here's what we have, just
okay,
so I can just lay this all out. The bank has no risk management whatsoever. They didn't have a chief risk officer for 8 months. They had a really time bomb portfolio, and they didn't change it. The supervisors didn't make them change it, didn't ask them to do anything out of the ordinary, gave them, sent a few letters, but did nothing beyond that to actually follow up. So they're at fault. The reason that these enhanced rules were put in under Dodd-Frank is because they knew that the examiners don't really do anything, and the enhanced rules would have forced much more stringent regulation. It would said, we're going to look at your liquidity on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a daily basis in some cases. We're going to force you into these stress tests. We're going to not allow you to opt out of things that would have forced you to put those unrealized losses into your capital rules. There were all kinds of rules that were put in there. The Fed and Congress got rid of them. So you have Congress being the problem. You have the Fed at the top level being the problem. You have the San Francisco Fed being the problem. You have Silicon Valley Bank being a problem. And you have depositors that are such dumbasses that they have millions, hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in a bank that it's
only insures 250. Yeah.
And it's public knowledge that they have a problem. There was a guy who was a short seller who was pointing this out months and months ago. And there was a story in the Wall Street Journal like half a year ago. And it's basic cash management of any business to not put all of your money in a place where you could lose it.
Okay. All right. So listen, on that point, there's two things that it seemed to me. One is that there are obvious mechanisms in which to protect that if you're a business. You got payroll. Your payroll is, let's say, I don't know, $1 million a month, or something like that. There are third parties that essentially orchestrate your spreading of the cash around to different facilities, so it's all insured. And
the cash sweep, and it's been around for decades and decades and decades. And anything above that amount that covers payroll and other expenses on a short-term basis, why are you in a zero interest-bearing bank account? Put it into a security. What are you doing?
Right.
You're ruining it. Like your
so here's the
duty to actually maximize your earnings is obliterated by that. Like Roku should have lost that money. Bottom line, they were stupid.
Well, wait a second. Now, were they stupid? Well, I mean, they were stupid. Well, they were stupid.
Yes.
But.
Well, they were penny wise and pound.
Was there also was there kickbacks here?
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's the other thing.
Well,
is that,
by the way, there's a whole other part of this where Silicon Valley Bank actually had the cash sweep ability. It's on their website. It's advertised. Like you can do this to minimize your risk, and only a very small portion of their deposits actually took advantage of the opportunity. And I've been told a couple things by a couple different people. One is that the bank said that, only some people can access this, and we're getting around to making a change so everybody can access it, and then they never did. I've been told that VCs essentially told the companies, you have to bank and put all your money in this bank, and you can't move it around or do anything else. And in exchange, founders and VCs would get sweetheart deals, zero interest.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's kickback. That's a kickback, isn't it?
There's corruption in here too, and I hope that does come out even further. But I mean, we already know about some of that stuff. First Republic, which is this other bank that's in trouble, they got a big cash infusion from the big banks of $30 billion, kind of a private rescue. They gave a below rate interest mortgage to Mark Zuckerberg as if he needed it, right? This is apparently in the tech world. This was like a quid pro quo.
I don't think it's just in the tech world. I don't think it's just in the tech world. I mean, I think there's instances where you put money in accounts.
There was the Friends of Angelo thing with Countrywide way back in the day. They would have, Chris Dodd got a cheap mortgage with Countrywide. I mean, yes, this stuff goes on.
You put enough money.
Part of this,
those VC, they weren't getting cheap mortgages. They were getting 0% mortgages.
Yeah.
That's what they were getting. You make sure you join the Diamond Club by making sure that we got $250 million, out of your companies in your portfolio, and we'll give you a $10 million loan, 0% interest.
Right. And then the other thing is that Silicon Valley Bank was essentially investing in a lot of these companies on the side. So they were taking these deposits and then investing back into these companies in a way that was supposed to be prohibited by the Volcker rule, which was this thing about using depositor money to make risky trades.
Right.
Investing in high-risk startups, it certainly would have been covered by the Volcker rule, but they got an exemption to that they also lobbied for. So there was a lot going on here with respect to the bank, but I don't think these depositors, these whiny VC idiots that think that they now have to reinvent insured cash sweeps or these kinds of things that get around the FDIC limits when they've already existed, much like when Uber and Lyft reinvented the bus, is just absolutely absurd.
But do you think that they think that you need to reinvent sweeps, or do you think that they're pretending that there's a problem here to justify having that kind of money in the bank unprotected because it was in the interest of the bank for them to do that, and they were getting kickbacks in the form of like sweetheart loans and stuff like that?
At first, I thought they were lying, but they're doing an incredibly good job of looking like dumb shits. They're doing
this is the classic stupid or evil debate,
and
I'm not convinced it has to be mutually exclusive.
It doesn't, but they're doing a fantastic job of looking like idiots.
When I see David Sacks going every single place he can go to get out the word that he was not, that he has, that it's not a question of regulation, and we need to fix the system so that people can do their payroll out of one bank. Like, what?
Yeah. The goal of all this, from the perspective of the people who got the billions of dollars in government largesse, and by the way, not just at Silicon Valley Bank, but it's really much more important for the banks that didn't fail, that were on the precipice, because now they have access to a loan facility where they can put in all that stuff that they had losses on, all those long dated securities. They can get it for a year, get a loan from the Federal Reserve at par. In other words, this is worth X amount of dollars now, but we'll give you the face value, which was much higher. And we'll give it to you as a loan. That's your collateral. Those are the people who got the real bailout. I mean, that's the one that nobody wants to talk about. But anyway, my point
and just to be clear, I just want people to understand it, because you're going to hear mark to market. When if I've got a some type of bond that I got that a 5-year bond, let's just say, at 3% when interest rates were low. And now it's not terribly valuable. It's worth a lot less than I paid for it, because nobody wants to be stuck in for 5 years in something that's only going to give them 3%. When I can go to a commercial, a retail bank and get a 4% a CD for 15 months right now. The mark to market means, like, how much would you get if you sold that security to someone who know they're only going to get 3%? It's secure, but like, it's only going to get 3%. You're going to be losing against inflation. Right. So the value of that is low. That's mark to market. Par is what I paid for it and anticipated what the value would be.
Right. That's right. And so it's a massive backdoor bailout, and it's mostly to the banks that were going to fail in the future and now will not, because they now have a rescue program in place. And that's a bailout to their shareholders. That's a bailout to their executives, and that's a bailout to their bondholders, which is exactly what was said was we're not going to ever do again.
What do you say to the response? Like, well, there's no tax dollars involved.
Yeah, of course there are tax. I mean, there are dollars involved in terms of what individuals are going to end up paying for this. I mean, it's supposed to be done through bank assessments. Well, what does the bank do when they get a big assessment? They try to figure out a way to make up the money on the back end, and ultimately that rolls down to their customers. Maybe they increase their overdraft fees by a little bit. It's a ridiculous argument. This was obviously a bailout. This was a bigger bailout than you even think about, because when people are arguing about this, they're really arguing only about the protection of depositors through the insurance that are uninsured. But it's that term facility that we were just talking about that's the real location of the bailout. But anyway, let me just make one last point, is that the entire modus operandi for those who orchestrated this is to get out of being blamed for it. So everything that you see a David Sacks say, everything that you see a Janet Yellen say, everything that you see a Jerome Powell say is designed to remove themselves from blame. And I will just briefly plug the story that we ran. I guess I actually ran it last night because the New York Times kind of scooped me a little bit. So I ran it like 2 minutes later, which is that in the moments when the federal regulators were figuring out what to do last week, they had come up with the plan, and they were just writing the statement out. And Treasury and the FDIC and the administration wanted to include the fact that there was a regulatory failure, and Jerome Powell blocked that language. He did not want any mention of regulation, supervision, or accountability, because that would all point back at him. And so he forced that out of the joint statement, and he even tried to influence the president's statement. Think about how extraordinary this is. You have the Federal Reserve Chairman saying, "Don't put regulation in your statement, Mr. President," the statement coming out of your mouth. And he got him to soften that a little bit, although the next day Biden came out and said there was a regulatory failure and we got to look at
Well,
who's
but how is this tenable here, David? I mean, like you've been sounding the alarm on these rapid rate increases by Powell. We've been talking about this on this program. Biden's inexplicable decision to keep him on for whatever reason is now hurting the administration. Like, what is the status of Jerome Powell's job security? Because if I were president, I mean, I forget exactly what the process would be to get rid of him, but actually, I guess that's my question. If Biden wanted to get rid of him, one, does he want to, and two, could he?
I don't think Biden would want to. I think the institution, when they see a liability there, potentially they take care of it on their own. If Powell has lost confidence inside the institution, it's going to be a problem for him to regain that. So it's a little more inside baseball than Biden walking up and saying you're fired. But I do think there is a possibility of that. And the hilarious thing about this, of course, is that in that 2021 conversation around should we renominate Powell or not, the people on the renominate Powell side, the Josh Barrows, the Matt Iglesiases, Dean Baker, I agree with him on a lot of things, but that's where he was on this, and several others, their entire argument was, yes, he hasn't been great on financial regulation, but the macro stuff and the interest rate stuff is more important, and he's been great on that. And since that time, we've gotten two bits of information. Number one, he turned his interest rate policy on a dime when inflation went up because they were all excited because he was promoting full employment. Well, he's abandoned full employment in favor of price stability. So that's number one. Number two, turns out financial regulation is pretty goddamn important. And it affects the inflation environment too. It affects the macro economy. And all of these people who said, "Oh, you can subordinate that. Financial regulation isn't a factor. The real work, you Philistine, the real work of the Federal Reserve is to promote employment in the economy." Well, you were wrong. You were all wrong. You were all 100% wrong. Financial stability is a key organ of the Federal Reserve's mission, and I'd be happy to strip it all from them because they're incompetents and they don't view it as part of their job either, which is why they failed. But it is right now, and you need someone in that office who actually knows how to do the damn job.
All right, so let me ask you. I get three more quick questions. One is related to that. It appears that the Fed is going to pause in their march to disempower labor because there's now a concern that the people who might lose their jobs are working in some of these banks. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. Like, I mean, they have been hell bent in trying to sink the economy in some fashion. And when they get the opportunity to do that through the failure of these banks, they decide maybe they're going to pause the interest rate hikes. What's your sense of that? Like,
well, here's
is this the silver lining for us?
No, unfortunately, because here's the thing they're not thinking about and that nobody is thinking about is that when you engage in this big a rescue of the economy and you say that all insured deposits are going to be covered and we're not going to let any important bank fail, what do? You're inviting those institutions to take risks and you're telling the market we're not going to have a problem because we're going to take care of it. And what has that created in the last week? Asset price inflation. We've seen crypto go crazy. We've seen the stock market go way up. And asset price inflation is also inflation. People think they have more money because they have more money in their portfolios and they're going to go out and spend again. So the inflation is now going to come through a different channel. And because the Fed is so blinkered that they think the only way to deal with this is through throwing a bunch of people out of work. It's just going to lead to throwing a bunch more people out of work in the aftermath. And they're having to clean up for their own mistake of weak regulation. And they're going to do it by pushing the economy into recession. That's what I fear.
Great. Did we need to bail out those depositors? I mean, did we? I mean, like, I think there's an argument that you don't want to throw people out of work in those companies that have overexposed, like Roku, the people working at Roku. But in the final analysis, because again, like you say, we just set out word that, like, you know, if you got, unless we reimpose some type of regulatory framework and structure for these banks, we've just basically put out the word that, like, you know, you can continue to do this type of stuff. Should we have bailed out those depositors, or was that a function? Were we convinced that it was a systemic risk because essentially just like most of the people that we end up hearing from, it was a risk to them. And so they tried to make it into a systemic risk.
We shouldn't have bailed them out, and we didn't have to bail them out. And if VCs were, in fact, what their name is, which is capitalists, they would have covered their own company's potential losses, which wouldn't have even been that big in the final analysis. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank had these long-dated securities, but they were government securities. They weren't going to go too far down in value, especially if they were held to maturity. And in the final analysis, those are still good assets. And when the FDIC finishes its job, whether they sell it to another bank or they sell the assets off, the actual spread is going to be rather minuscule. It's not going to be more than the 10% haircut. It's probably going to be less than that.
For depositors. Okay.
That's what it would have been. Obviously, It's going to be a 0% haircut now. But the VCs have boatloads of money, and they had the ability to float these guys for a week. They're already invested in these companies, right?
Right.
Do they stand behind these companies? Do they believe in these companies? Do they think these companies are going to succeed? Well, then give them more money to get them through in a bridge loan or however you want to structure it to get it through this tumultuous week or two. Daniel Davies, who is a bank analyst, he was on. We had him on for a Q&A, and the way that he put it was, I thought, really, really spectacular and kind of cut to the heart of this problem. And I'm calling it up right now. The way that he said it was, if a bunch of hedge funds with $100 billion under management suddenly got hit by a cyber attack, and it turned out that none of them employed a chief technology officer, none of them used the widely available firewall software that they could have, would everyone just be given cybersecurity insurance provided by taxpayers? I don't think so. I mean, these guys did something wrong. The companies did something wrong, and they immediately got let off the hook for it because they whined and played a crybaby game. But the point is that they did something wrong. B, 90% of these startups fail anyway, and we've been having tens of thousands of jobs being lost in the tech sector for the last 6 months, and it hasn't affected the broader economy. Most of these people who are getting laid off are pretty rich, by the way. But the bigger point is that the VCs could have handled it. They have billions of dollars in reserve. They could have handled this situation for the short time period it would have taken for the FDIC to fix it.
What are the chances of getting 60 votes in the Senate or the House, whatever we need to roll back the rollback?
To repeal the Crapo bill?
Yeah.
When you saw that bill be released by Elizabeth Warren and Katie Porter, not one of the Democrats who voted before that bill signed onto it. And they're all standing their ground. They're all holding the line. And as long as that's the case, you're not going to get anywhere close to the votes that you need. And this risk will continue. The Federal Reserve, the good news is the Federal Reserve has every opportunity to, on the rules that it discretionarily did, they have the ability to change those rules, tighten those rules in any way they choose. There's an internal review going on at the Fed. A lot of members of Congress want that to be an independent review. They have the ability to strengthen those rules for the stadium banks. Maybe they'll do so, but I think that's probably the best we'll see.
I mean, this is like the danger. This is what we talk about when, the whole accelerationist thing about, maybe if Trump gets elected, we'll all be able to come together as a progressive movement after. Like, Republicans break things. They pass this deregulatory bill with the help of some Democrats, and it's almost impossible once Democrats even get back in power for them to build it back up. Like, this is going to be an example of that. No regulation seems like it's going to get passed.
Yeah, I mean, what we know about financial regulation is that it exists on a pendulum. So a lot of risk is pooled. People take, probably very wild bets, and something breaks, and then the pendulum swings towards more regulation. Like, oh, we gotta fix the problem, and then everybody forgets about it, and the pendulum starts to swing back. That's where we were in the last, 5-6 years, is the pendulum swinging back. We had this breakage, but apparently that hasn't stopped anybody. So the pendulum's still going,
right?
And we'll get some other breakage in the future, and at some point it'll hit a tipping point and it'll swing back again. But I don't know that we're there yet.
That pendulum swang pretty damn quickly too, based upon the size of. I mean, you think about how long it took Glass-Steagall to get repealed after the Great Depression. Now that we've basically, shortened that time, what it takes to forget what happened in 2008 by like a. I don't know,
the 2018 bill, the Crapo bill, passed on the same week as the 10th anniversary of the failure of Bear Stearns. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the short memory of Congress when it comes to these issues.
And it just took a few years for these regional banks to explode to just nearly that $250 billion threshold, and they're all up there at this point. I mean, anyway, it's just infuriating.
David Dayen, always a pleasure. Good luck with your Twitter handle.
Yeah, so it's by the way, for Majority Report listeners, where I'm temporarily hanging out is at David_Dayen, Dayen.
Well, that is embarrassing. You got to use an underscore. You got to use an underscore. That is really, oh boy, God. All right. Well, tune in, check out David's Twitter feed to get some great deals on computers and hopefully maybe some cell phones.
Everything must go.
David Dayen, always a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Bye.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. When we come back, the LetterHack will be joining us. Matt Strackbein. Strackbein or Bean? Bein. And filmmaker or filmmaker? Janek Ambros will be joining us. The filmmaker of Mondo Hollywoodland and the animator, the creator of Mondo Hollywoodland, the comic. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us, Janek Ambros, the filmmaker of Mondo Hollywoodland. You can see an ad for it right there.
Whoa.
And Matt Strackbein, the LetterHack, who actually created this entire comic based upon the film. All right, let's just get right down to the burning question. Matt, we'll start with you. What is the LetterHack?
Oh, good question. The LetterHack is a prolific letter writer, and particularly with comic books. What little fame I have is from being a huge nerd and getting a lot of letters published that I would write to comic book editors. So in the back of the book, they have a letter column, and I was in there weekly for years.
Oh, that's interesting. I
Yeah.
find it hard to believe that anybody who's making comic books is really not getting their fame from being a huge nerd. But leaving that aside, all right, Janek, let's start with you. The film comes out in 2019. Tell us a little bit about the film. It looks, and I haven't seen the film yet, but I'm inspired now by the comic book to go watch it. It looks insane.
Yeah, it's totally insane. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Elaborate just a little bit more than that.
It's about a politically confused but groovy mushrooms dealer who traverses through Hollywood and kind of encounters all these goofy characters to find the meaning of the word Mondo. So it kind of has this kind of inspired by like John Waters, Robert Downey Sr., kind of, experimental psychedelic film.
Mm.
Yeah, there was like a quality of like Putney Swope in some of the.
I'm a huge Putney Swope fan. Yeah.
Yeah, that I saw in like in the previews, and when I see Mondo for whatever reason, I always think of Michael O'Donoghue, who was a Saturday Night Live writer. Maybe you don't know him, I guess. I mean, I'm dating myself. He was in the 70s, and his film, you can find it. I think it's probably on YouTube. But it was Mr. Mike's Mondo video, and it's nuts. But it's worth checking out. All right. So Matt, what inspired you to make a comic book? I mean, usually it goes the other way.
Yeah. Well, in this case, so you guys remember over Halloween, I did all of those spoofs of you guys as the Scooby-Doo gang.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, he saw those, reached out to me and said, that would be great for the adaptation of my movie. Are you in? I couldn't accept the job right away because I had, other obligations. So I watched the trailer for it and I was immediately like hooked. So I came up with some test pages, sent them off. The rest is history. I made the comic. I don't know. What was it? Like 4 or 5 weeks later, something that?
I got really lucky because like Twitter scares me. I don't like Twitter. I usually just like look at hockey highlights, and then I just stumbled.
Good man.
Yeah, I'm a huge Devils fan, by the way. Not
get off, get out of here. Although you have that with Bradley, but anyway, go on.
You guys will have your TV show, your sports show about the Devils winning the Stanley Cup this June. So.
Whoa!
Not if they have to face the Rangers in the first round. Anyway, go on.
We've gotten sidetracked.
The algorithm kind of brought me to Matt, and I got really lucky. And I just love his work. And I was just like, what is this? And I reached out to him, and I sent him the movie, and I was just shocked he responded to it because it's a very odd movie, and then he just did an amazing job. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than just it was like magic.
Well, Janek, why did you want to do that? It's cool, but like, what made you think that like, I've made the movie, now it needs to be a comic book?
Well, it's one of those things where it was like 5 years ago when I was trying to make some of my other movies, I had like a Francis Perkins biopic, and like executives were like, who the hell wants to watch a movie about Social Security, that kind of shit. Yeah, exactly. I'm like one guy.
She grew up in Worcester. She went to Classical High, which is where my folks went, actually, high school. So
there's a scene in Worcester in the script. But anyway, I was kind of hitting a wall, and I made this movie for like $10,000. I got some good advice from I kept bothering Francis Ford Coppola's lawyer like over every month. I was like, can I get his advice? Finally, I got a hold of him, and he was like, make a movie with an iPhone. So I was like, okay. So I just kind of made this crazy film. And, it's a movie like this has a hard time, penetrating an audience.
Right.
So it's just kind of this, I wanted to kind of keep this life cycle of the movie. And I figured, a graphic novel would be a cool way to kind of like reignite it a little bit for an audience. And like I said, Matt just did like magic. I don't even know. It was bizarre to witness because he just did it. And it was just like, it was a bizarre, it was a great experience,
Well,
good. So right.
Well, I was going to say, just in terms of movies and comic book adaptations, not every comic book needs to be a movie. I think a lot of people would disagree, but I would say that every movie could be a comic book. That's not a problem. Like adapting something that already exists, there's your pre-visualization. So normally I make a comic book based off a script, and 50% of that is me wondering, okay, they've described some of this, but for the most part, what's this going to look like? Well, here's the movie. The whole thing is right there in front of me. I didn't have to think at all. So it was just drawing what I saw on the screen. And that really did give me a leg up. It was unconventional compared to normal, but, it expedited the process.
In that process, were there places where you took like a little bit, like you reinterpreted some stuff and maybe like, tried to either emotionally fit a different medium or reinterpret it? People do this with plays all the time. Like there's an Ibsen play that was just rewritten that's on Broadway right now that, more or less sort of updates it in different ways, stages it in a different way. Was there any of that was involved in that? And if so, like where and how?
Well, yeah, totally. First thing I did was I made a list of timestamps and tried to translate that into pages. So it was like, there's a lot in the movie. It's very fast paced. So like a few seconds could be several pages. So I had to really like think about it, right? And I watched a movie maybe like 12 times just in that initial stage of trying to break it out by page and then by panel. And it ended up being like 90 pages long, which was not practical. So we got on the phone and talked about it really quickly, and didn't talk about it that long at all, which I thought there'd be more of an editorial process, but we sort of both saw eye to eye right away on what should stay in and what could be cut. And so that's cool because the movie and the comic book are not like redundant. Like you could read it or watch it and have a unique experience. They stand on their own. But the film is very, Mondo, right? That's just like the ultimate word. I don't want to give any
What does that mean?
Mondo,
I'm joking. I was joking. I was joking, but that was how I was going to open up the interview.
It is actually a subgenre of exploitation film. Normally, you could probably describe it better than me, but it's usually like a pseudo documentary style.
Yeah, there's the Mondo's a subgenre, and it's very crass. This was like very like late 60s, 70s. And I decided it's not like that. Like it's not like very crass and like just kind of like crazy exploitation. Like people kind of joke it's like a wholesome drug movie because like I didn't go this route of like, some of that kind of weird, Mondo's a weird genre. And some like Mondo purists are like, there's not enough like sex and nudity and like weird stuff. And I don't know. I didn't really have like a lot of interest in doing that. So I like I said, people kind of call it like a wholesome, drug conspiracy movie. So it's kind of, it doesn't have, it's got some of those like Mondo purist elements to it.
But keeping with the theme that it didn't have to be like traditional or conventional, those are the best words I can think to use. I was able to put scenes on top of each other. Certain pages can be read a few different ways. But by the time you get to the end of the page, you'll understand what's happening in the story. And so to answer your original question, like, yeah, there were times where I had to think it wasn't a compromise as much as it was a creative license to combine scenes over top of each other. And so when you read the comic, you may be like, wait a minute, what's going on here at first? And then like I say, by the end of the page, you'll understand exactly what's happened.
Interesting. And so Janek, was there any and you can tell us, was there any, like when you saw it, were you like, oh, darn it, like I didn't want this interpreted that way, or was it that? No, there was none of that.
It was amazing because there's
Matt,
like,
we won't tell Matt.
there's like 8 or 9 3-act structures in the movie because it's an ensemble, kind of like an Altman movie where it's like,
that was the other thing. It reminded me of The Player a little bit, just from the from the trailer. There was just a quality.
That's one of my favorite movies of all time. But yeah, just kind of like shortcuts and stuff like that, where it's like there's so many 3-act structures, and somehow when I spoke to Matt, he it takes a lot of like dissection, because like it's a goofy movie. Like I'm not trying to say, oh, that's like this complicated writing process, though it was. And Marcus Hart, who's a co-writer on it, is also a big Majority Report fan, I should say.
Oh, wow.
So me, him, and Chris Blim, who's also the star and producer, we kind of made this madness where like we would write and shoot at the same time. So like I remember being at a bar and a car exploded out on the street. So I ran with my cell phone and I just shot it. And then we wrote that into the Antifa stuff. So like there was this kind of really complicated but organized chaos, and Matt just understood it immediately. Like I was really just shocked, because it's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I like it, it was fun, it was stylistic and gonzo, whatever, but he understood it all in like one conversation. He understood that all. So I remember him pitching me the idea of like, and I just go, do whatever you want. I mean, so I was just really shocked by his ability to kind of understand what we were trying to do, because it is such a bizarre movie. So I'm still kind of, stressed. So no, there was zero issues other than like a line of dialogue, but like, no, I was so thrilled when I was looking at the pages he was making. I was just like, keep going. I don't know, just do whatever.
It's funny when you said shortcuts, it reminds me that I think it was actually also Altman did Shortcuts, which also was very much about like that, just sort of out and around. I think it was LA, right? I mean, it was
LA. Yeah. And then Paul Thomas Anderson did Magnolia, which is a kind of derivative work of that. And it kind of has this just constant cycle of characters going in this chaotic, frenetic way. But like, there's, like I said, there's some thought and structure behind it, but first and foremost, it's silly and fun,
So, I guess I have two. Well, Matt, are you thinking about doing this for other movies? And then
Sure.
and then are you guys planning, like, is there a future collaboration here where the animation? I don't want to put any pressure on you guys. I'm just curious what's next here.
Oh, we are. Yeah, we're already talking about it. That's in the works as we speak. There's like I said, any movie could be a comic. Reach out, if anybody wants to make their movie into a comic, we can do that. And my thing is, I did all of the adaptation, I did all the lettering, the layouts, all the art, the pencils, the inks, and the coloring. I'm one-stop shop. I used to art direct for comic books, and I used to edit for comic books. So being able to like jump in and do any one aspect or all of them is totally my wheelhouse. So but we weren't even done with this, and we were already talking about the next project, and we've got a few options, and I think we're honing in on one, but more on that.
Maybe we can do a Francis Perkins graphic novel.
Honestly, that would be pretty good.
That would be great.
Pretty
actually.
cool.
That would be really cool. It really is neat. Where can people can see? Well, let's start with this. Where can people buy the? Oh, well, let me ask you this, Janek. In what order would you like if I'm to consume both of these? What order? Have you given any thought to like what's the best experience to do the graphic novel first or the movie first?
Whatever the person wants to do. I don't think there's a specific way to do it. I think it's kind of neat to have the graphic novel first, but I also think the movie maybe makes more sense. But I think I'm so curious to see what it's like to read that and then watch the movie. So either way, I mean, I think it's I think it's chill either way.
My wife definitely she's my go-to proofreader most of the time. She's an educator, so I always rely on her. So she read it and then said, I got to watch the movie. So she like dropped everything, watched the movie after that. And she was like, oh, wow. I mean, you did such a good job adapting it, but it really is its own unique experience.
She liked the movie.
Oh yeah, loved it.
Is it the first time you guys have found that out? It's good. We're bringing you guys together. Here it is. Here is the comic, and we'll put up a link.
Yeah.
We'll obviously post a link. This is where you can buy it.
That's CWS Bookstore.
Super cool. And
yeah, that stands for Comics Wellspring. They're out of Plymouth, Michigan, so it's an American-made product. Those folks are fantastic. They printed the book. They also crux.
It's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, they do a great job, and they're great for independent creators like us because the crux of the industry has always been distribution. So they'll print the book and warehouse it, and so retailers and readers alike can just go to cwsbookstore.com, look for Mondo Hollywoodland, and you can get a physical or digital version of it. But since we're big fans of the show and we met through like the community, so out of appreciation for having us on, we have a discount code that folks should use, and you can get 70% off the physical book.
Wait, what? 70% off?
Yeah, for
That's
30
too
days.
much. That's too
Well,
much,
guys are
Matt.
not business. You guys went to the Sam Cedar School of Business.
Well, if you want the digital copy, if you can't wait for the physical copy to show up, you can get that for $6. But 70% off the physical book for the next 30 days if you use majority at checkout.
You know what I would do? I would get the 70% off, and then I'd buy the digital too. That's what I would do.
There you go. Perfect.
Personally.
Many
That's
people are
that's-
saying.
That's the way I roll. I
They
don't
make
just.
good gifts.
I have redundancy. That's my. And Janek, where can we watch the movie?
Amazon Prime. It's streaming. So if you have Prime, you can just watch it for free. I think the other question though is where can we see Bad Situationalist?
Ooh, Bad Situationist.
I met Mark Maron at a screening, and I said, and I mentioned that movie, and I think another one of them, and he looked at me like, "Who the fuck are you?" Like
Yeah,
how do you
that's.
how do you know what these are? Who are you? Just looked at me kind of like, what?
Bad Situationist is got some issues that
We should do a double feature. This is one of my points.
so many issues. But maybe sometime in the future. But pilot season and Caboose is available on iTunes, and pilot season I got to get out there too. So yeah, maybe we'll get
One of these days.
Maybe we'll get a comic made of it. Maybe a Bad Situationist as
Let's
a
go.
comic would actually be pretty
Yes.
insane.
See?
That would
I'm
actually
ready.
be pretty insane. All right, so Amazon Prime, we can watch, and that's it, or
That's kind of the go-to place. Just because
Okay.
you don't have to pay. If you have Prime, you don't have to pay. And then there's it's on Vimeo too. And then Sam, thanks for when I was this time last year, I was on the border. I was in Ukraine, and you gave out the address for the refugees. So I appreciate that.
did you IM?
Yeah, you. I remember I was
remember that.
there, and you. Yeah, it was like this week last year. It was
Oh, wow.
or maybe last week, last year. But yeah, I appreciate that. That was helpful.
Amazing. Well, guys, congratulations. Really looks
Thanks.
great. I can't wait to both. I've read the comic, but I can't wait to read the comic again and watch the film now. As soon as I'm allowed to watch a movie that doesn't involve like kids themes. Matt Strackbein and Janek Ambros, thanks so much for your time today, guys. Really appreciate it. We'll
Thanks,
put
guys.
links to all this in the podcast and YouTube and on the website. Thanks again, guys.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right, folks, we're going to head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will take some IMs, and we may take your calls. I'm not sure. I'm not going to promise because I always overpromise, and now I'm going to try and manage expectations. But we got a couple of clips. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only help this show survive and thrive, but you also get the free half free of commercials, and you can IM us on the app during the fun half. All sorts of that's basically all the bonus right there. Emma, ESVN.
Yeah, we've been discussing the Aaron Rodgers endless drama, the Lamar Jackson contract negotiations, and Will from Indiana, our ESVN correspondent on college basketball, called in and gave us a rundown. I know your brackets are probably already filled out by now, but you can fill out other, shortened brackets at this point, I think, even though, wow, were there some upsets yesterday, Bradley. But youtube.com/ESVN show. Check it out.
Matt.
Can't believe Princeton won. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't care about college basketball.
Whoa, really? I find that
Look,
surprising.
I don't care about college basketball that much either, just because I prefer my players to get paid.
Yeah, and to be adults and professional. But, hopefully there's some buzzer beaters or something. But on Left Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, talking to Jamie Peck about Cop City and where we're at 3 years post George Floyd. Patreon.com/Left.
She's down there now, right? Is that right?
She's doing videos. She's been talking to people about it.
Oh, I see.
And yeah,
I thought she was down there.
Maybe she was down there. I don't believe she's down there right now, but we'll find out.
Okay, I thought somebody just sent me that over the weekend, or not over the weekend.
No, but she was, right? Yeah. So.
Well, check it out. Matlack Media, folks. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Dayen.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dayen.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck 'em. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. It's the fun half of the program. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland, Matt, Bradley, you listening,
all of
watching.
us.
Tucker lying. If nothing else, Ben Shapiro is consistent. He came to the University of Michigan when I was a student. My roommate went to his talk and asked about abandoning school lunch programs. He said the same horseshit about feeding children should be a parent's number one priority, feeding them before yourself. And if that parent fails to do so, the state should step in and essentially abduct the children from their parents.
It's
demonic.
It's personal pathology, not because we played him yesterday saying that free school lunches would not do anything to alleviate child poverty. Because
Except for
it obviously would.
Except for, yes, it is absolutely obvious that it would. And how does this genius expect us to be aware that we'll catch some